All right, welcome everyone to the Mint Door podcast. I'm Dr. Laura Schwindt.
And I am Dr. Karen Tindall.
And we're excited today because we have a wonderful guest with us, Dr. Kim Harms. And she is coming to us from Minnesota, which, as many of you may know, I lived for a little while, and hence the accent. So my accent is Minnesotan, Dr. Harms will be Minnesotan, and Karen's will be Arkansanian with a little bit of a UK twist.
Perfectly Arkansan, I would say.
Excellent. Dr. Harms, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's just a privilege to be here. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Love you too.
Yes. Oh, well, you practiced clinical dentistry for over 30 years, and in both public health and as a co-practice, private practice owner. And that has led you to where you are now. So I'd love if you gave us a little background on your journey through your clinical practicing and to what you do now.
Well, it's been a long journey. And I graduated from dental school in 1981. And at that time, not a lot of women around at the time. And so that was kind of a new thing in many areas. Most of the places that I practiced, I was the first woman in the area. But I practiced I started out in the United States Public Health Service, which was a fabulous experience, and National Health Service Corps, and was a clinical director for a dental portion of the health clinic. And then my husband and I bought a practice up here in Minnesota, and he's from Minnesota. He's the 12th of 14 children. So we came up to be near his family, and it was fabulous. I love it here. I just love it here. And in the meantime, I did a lot of other things. I worked with developmentally disabled patients who were transferring from a large clinical treatment center to group homes. I started a little pilot project for the state of Minnesota and did a little work in there as we were building our practice. And then I worked a lot in dental leadership. I was the first woman president of the Minnesota Dental Association. And then I worked on at the ADA as a national spokesperson for over 21 years. And during that time, I did learn a lot about managing conflict and managing crisis situations. Our practice went pretty smoothly. It was a small town practice. 30 years. We were in Farmington, Minnesota. I loved every minute of it. And then I went out on an injury, basically keep your neck straight, do what your mother says, sit up straight when you're practicing. I had a problem with my neck that translated into nerve damage in my drilling fingers of all places. So I had to stop practicing at that time. So now I'm actually working with my daughter, who is a dental attorney. It's fabulous. And I speak on, because I've been through a lot in my life. I did lose my husband, Jim, last year. I lost a son to suicide, lost my mother to suicide. Been through a lot of issues in my practice life. So I talk to dental groups about managing a crisis and conflict in their office, managing what I call emotional emergencies, which is anything that distracts you from clinical care. And I've been having a great time doing that.
That's an amazing background. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for, we'd love to touch on some of those, but I think Karen is mostly interested in one topic there.
Yes. You said that you were the first woman president of the Minnesota Dental Association. Can you give us some idea of what that was like at the time when you became that first woman leading the way? How was that?
Well, it was a wonderful time, actually. And what I had to do, I had to make a deal with them when they asked me to come in, because I had children at home. And at the time, the president of the Dental Association was present at every subcommittee meeting. And so probably 4 to 5 times a week, they would have meetings at night. And this was before Zoom. You had to, be there in person. It wasn't too far of a drive. It was only about a half hour, so not too hard for me. But I couldn't do that. I had kids at home. I had basketball games. Those were the more important to me, actually, than the dental meetings. So I made a deal with the Dental Association. I said, look, I will be there at every board meeting. I'll preside over every board meeting. I'll testify when you need to testify. I'll do all the things that we need to do. but I'm not going to be showing up at all the subcommittee meetings. I can take the report from the subcommittee meetings. So I did change a bit about what, how the president managed the meetings. I was also the first woman in the whole 10th district, which is a whole upper Midwest, first woman. And so part of the job as a president is you go to the other areas in your district. So North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa was in our district. And so we would, before I became president, it typically was a husband and the wife would show up and so on and so forth. And usually they were older. And so I kind of changed that too, because if I was leaving for a couple of days, I had kids at home. So my husband would stay home, which was great. He was a great partner for me on this. And I couldn't stay very long. I really couldn't stay for as many of the social occasions, but I basically stuck to strictly to business. And we had a big business when I became president, because a large insurance company had actually started a program just as I was coming in, where they said, you are a good dentist, you're prime. You are a bad dentist, you're non-prime. They don't say bad dentist, it just says non-prime, but I think we all get the point.
Mm-hmm.
And we aren't going to tell you how we make that determination, but we're going to tell the employers and everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so I had to kind of take them on. Mm-hmm. And I think I got a lot of support from the members because I did take them on. I took them right on. And we ended up passing legislation thank goodness for our students, by going to the students and involving them as well, to eliminate. Basically, what we did is we said, well, what is your criteria? How can we be judged good or bad based upon this unknown secret proprietary formula? And we passed a law that said you had to reveal the formula to us and tell us how you're judging us. And as soon as they did that, of course, the program just fell apart because they really couldn't justify that formula. And so I had a very busy year, but I also had tremendous support from the members and that was 20 years ago. And people are still, great. They talk to me about it now, which has really been wonderful. But I had a big challenge, and that's always a fear when you become president of something, that, you show up on your watch, something big happens. Mm-hmm. So it was a very busy year.
Listening to how you described that, I think, so this is a topic that comes up really frequently for us, of how do you juggle everything? How do you, be the parent? How do you be the dentist or the doctor, or and do it? But like, you were at the leading edge of, like, I bet it's inspiring to hear that back then that's what you were. You're an example, I think, really, that people is still relevant today, to say you can do these things, you can chase these career goals and aspirations and have a family and do it all.
Thank you. I think the key is just before you start delineating very quickly, I can do, once a month meetings, and then I'll be at home and you can catch me. Luckily, email was out. It wasn't that long ago, it was 2000. You can, it's like a long time, 22 years, but that really, I think, is the key, is to look right up front and say, this is what I can do and this is what I can't do. And I did not miss a game because I didn't do anything on Friday. The game nights were Friday nights, so I did not miss, a game with my kids. I was there for them when they had activities and so on. So I think that was, I think they'd all tell you that important part, because you can't get that time back.
No. I think that you bring up such a good point there, in that you really knew what your values were and you stuck to them. And because you stuck to them, it all ended up working. And we're not saying that it wasn't at times crazy or hectic, right? We're not saying that, but when you look back at that, you can say, I never missed a game.
Yeah. And that was important, very important to my kids.
Oh, bravo.
I have grandkids, so I'm waiting. They're 5 years old, so their games, my little 5-year-old, I went down to Kansas City to watch her little basketball game, which they don't really know about dribbling yet, kind of, maybe 1 or 2 dribbles. And but it was so much fun. I wouldn't miss it. I videotaped it. It doesn't matter how good they are or what, it just matters that you're there.
Yeah.
You support them and you think they're wonderful. And they just know that.
Oh, a new guard to support. Love it.
It's so much fun. It's even more fun because I have no
Yeah.
responsibility.
Right. You
Great.
can spoil them and then you get to go home.
I do. It's fabulous. It's fabulous. I just love it.
Awesome.
Everything is solved by a cookie. It's just great.
You know, there's a good quote right there. Everything is solved by a cookie.
Yep.
You can use that as the tagline for this podcast.
Yes,
Exactly. That's a Kimism.
So
yes. With good oral hygiene mechanisms afterwards. So you just, let's keep it.
that proviso will go in there.
Yes.
So if everything can be solved by a cookie, you deal a lot with conflict. Like
Yes.
you help people sort out conflict, and obviously it's a little bit more complicated than solving it with a cookie, although that would be nice. So do you have any top tips for somebody who is experiencing conflict in their practice or in their hospital or where they're working? What would your advice be?
The number one issue and the number one most important thing to do when you're dealing with conflict, and conflict is between people, right? You've got someone at work, maybe you're not working well with, is to take the people out of the conflict and focused on the issue. And for whatever reason, we seem, even as a country, to have lost that. If you just even take a look for whatever, party you're at, whatever on the news, if you take a look on the news, if an issue comes up, no matter what it is, we tend to go for the people involved instead of having a good debate about the issue itself. Mm-hmm. And that tends to happen at work. If you don't really like somebody, if maybe you don't really get along well with somebody, you just automatically assume that person is got some evil intent for whatever it is that they do. And you're angry with the person, so you can't open up your brain to help solve the issue. So what we need to do, the best thing you can do to solve a conflict, is to just sit back and say, okay, let's take the people out. Let's take a look. This needs to get done. Our goal is this. This needs to get done. How can this person help us do this? How can this person help us do that? And let's work together and take the people out. And that's why sometimes I work as a mediator, and sometimes a mediator is needed because there's so much emotion involved between the two people. You just have to get someone to sit in the middle and say, okay, guys, let's just focus on the facts right now. Let's just assume that everybody's got good in mind. People have good intentions. Let's assume that instead of the opposite. And let's just think maybe they think this way because of this, or maybe they think, and I try to help them see the other side. Maybe if we work together in dentistry, of course, it's to provide the best patient care possible. What can the two of us do together to make sure that patient has a good experience? So that's the most important thing, is take the people out of it and focus on the issue, and really seriously, watch the news, whatever news you watch the news and look where they go. They don't go there now. And I think so it's not giving us, I think it's harder now because as a society, we tend not to do that. And it creates more conflict because that's where we look for problem resolution, right? So just watch that, and it'll give you a new perspective to say, oh, they just go right for the throat, that person,
Right.
That's so easy to remember. Take the people out of it and just look at the problem.
And it probably takes a lot of the drama away from it too. And then you can just focus on the facts and the solutions.
Yes, it takes a lot of the drama out and a lot of the hurt. And many times in a dental office, an issue that seems big at the time and seems pretty cut and dry is very complex, because it could be that there's two people that maybe, a month ago, somebody felt slighted by somebody else, and then they felt slighted again. And so all of that kind of gets rolled up into a current issue that seems to be hard to solve when you can just take the people out and deal with the issue. And of course, and again, with your goal in mind, and in a dental office, it's how do we provide the best care for our patients? And patients don't like drama. They don't want to come in. They want to come in, you're working on their teeth. You got a drill in their mouth and you're working on their teeth. When they come into that office, they want everybody happy because they don't want any distractions. When you're drilling on that tooth, you don't want to be thinking about something else. You want to be like in a happy place, drilling on that tooth and focusing on that, what you're focusing on. So they can tell in a dental office if there's drama going on and if there's conflict, and it's, sometimes it's just the body language from people have, how do you transfer the patient to the front desk? You know, if you need to have a nice little wonderful banter kind of going on to make people feel comfortable.
Oh, so important. Awesome. Great tip. You know, earlier in the discussion, you alluded to crisis management, that you help with crisis management and that you've even gone through some crisis in your life. So can you explain a little bit of what crisis management means and how you help practices and offices deal with that?
Sure. I kind of have some crisis management in a number of different areas, you know, working with the ADA many times when the AIDS epidemic came out. I helped them work with some of the issues over should dentists be able to see patients with AIDS? Are we at risk? And of course, you know, with what are standard precautions now, used to be called universal precautions, you know, we had to kind of work that out within our profession. Another crisis that I worked with was the biofilm in our water lines. We didn't really even know about that till a big article came out in Milwaukee, and you know, it was a big crisis. And those big crises that occur like in the natural out in the world, the best way to manage them is to be calm. And typically the way I would handle that is say, well, you know, just ask your dentist how they take care of the water, you know, ask your dentist. And that kind of takes the pressure off of dentists are bad. In fact, there was a Barbara Walters back in the day when there were 4 television stations. Remember that? You might not remember, you might be thinking there were 4. So if somebody was watching television, they only had 4 stations. Now there's like hundreds. And 2020 was a big one. Most people were watching 2020. And on a 2020 program in the year 2000, Barbara Walters was doing a program on biofilm in the water. And she had, there's a visual of a toilet flushing, and they tested the toilet water and they tested the water from whatever dentist they were using, and found that the dental water lines were more contaminated with bacteria than the toilet water. So you can imagine the visual on that one. And at the time, I was president of the Dental Association. So at the time, I was sitting in my living room with all the cameras focused on me watching the 2020 program. And what they wanted was a reaction like, you know, something like that. And I knew I had to just kind of staying calm. Staying calm is a big key, stay calm. So I had to stay calm. And at the very end, when they asked me about it, I just said, well, you know, we've known about this for a couple of years, and we're doing something, we're disinfecting our water lines. Why don't you just ask your dentist? If you have any questions, ask your dentist. And basically they accepted that, and it took the wind out of the anti-dental sales at the time. And so I think that when there's 3 things when there's a crisis that you have to do. First of all, and stay calm. You can't let your expression show. The second one is tell the truth about what happened. Don't lie. People can pick that up in a heartbeat. And then make it right. Do whatever you can take to make it right. And sometimes you might have a crisis in your office, as I did when my son took his own life back in 2009. It absolutely destroyed me. It destroyed my husband. We were practicing together. We were a basket case. You can imagine we couldn't hardly, you know, you're a zombie when you have a horrible trauma like that in your life. You kind of walk around like a zombie. Probably for me, it was probably about 5 years of zombiehood, but you're in a horrible state, and you don't know how you're going to work, and you have to go back to work, and patients can tell if you're distracted. And so do patients want you to work on them if you are a zombie and you can hardly move? No, they don't. It's a really tough thing. So I also work with emotional crises that occurs within an office. It causes that kind of horrible catastrophic loss or stress that people suffer. And the way that you manage that, first of all, is you have to acknowledge it. When somebody has suffered a catastrophic loss in your office, you need to acknowledge the loss. You need to provide a place for them to go when they, you know, because they're going to have meltdowns if it's a catastrophic loss. There's going to be times when something's going to trigger you. As anyone that suffered a loss knows, you get triggers at very unexpected moments. And what do you do when you're with a patient and something triggers you? We need to have a plan. We had a crying room that had like Visine in it, and, you know, makeup remover, and, you know, everything we could have to provide for us some comfort. You have to have a plan where other team members can take over if something like that happens. If they know, you know, get a signal, okay, trigger, I've been triggered, come help me, you know, come and help, take over for a few minutes while I get myself put together. And one of the things that happens in a dental office, unlike other places, when you have a catastrophic loss like that, my son was very well known. He was very much loved in the community, very well known. And so for 6 months, the first 6 months after he died, the vast majority of my patients that I was seeing for clinical care, and, you know, my 2 hygienists, I was checking 2 hygienists, their patients knew who he was, and had, because it was such a big community event, were unable to tell me that they were sorry, because when you have a loss, you need to tell the person, I'm so sorry, and you give them a hug. Although I know you can't hug anymore. I don't know what we're going to do after COVID, but I mean, we could hug back in those days. And that would happen, so it's a trigger, it's a trigger when you're trying to get through your day, and then you see someone for the first time, I'm so sorry for your loss. And, how do you get through that? It's a horrible experience. It's horrible, but it's something you have to do. There's really no alternative. You can't be cold and not mention it. You have to kind of go there. So I think just understand that in dentistry, many times grief is kind of done in secret, because you can't show your patients too much, because they don't want to weepy dentists working on you, right? And but yet you're going to feel it. So I think as a team, we need to acknowledge that the person going through this is going to go through a really tough time, and that we do have to smile and try to go through it as best we can, in our zombie state, and work together to know that it's going to be a long time. Because for the first 6 months, I was triggered, probably 3 times an hour, maybe, with those patients. And then the next 6 months, you'd gotten through that first set of patients, but then you have the 1 year recalls coming in, and so again, triggered, but less the second 6 months. And then after about a year, that kind of calms down. So just understanding that grief is something that's a very difficult thing to get through. And as a team, if you can lead your team through these grief experiences and lead them together, you're going to be a much stronger team. And like right now, when I don't know how it is in your area, but especially outstate Minnesota, it's very difficult to find assistants and hygienists to work anymore. And during these times, if this is one of the best things you can do to build up loyalty in your group, is to have a team that they know you're going to be there for them in difficult times. It's probably one of the most important things you can do to keep your team together. That was a long answer, but I did kind of put a lot of different types of crises in there.
Right. No, I love how, you distinguish that there are these crises that are outside of clinical. And, because we as people, we're not just clinical. We have many facets to our lives, and so does our team. And I also think that having the support of your team behind you through that is, like you say, we kind of have to put on this happy face, but when you can be vulnerable with your team and know that they got your back, it probably helps a lot.
It does.
Wow.
Yeah.
Important work that you do. Thank you.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from listening to that. And I just hadn't even thought about how you described it with all the recalls, with everybody coming in and that process, and how that process, it just hit me then, like, wow, that is just like a cyclical thing that
bam.
Repeatedly. So I know, you speak and we hear about these very, very hard times that you've gone through, but you also have some things now that are your passion projects. And there's one that involves faraway places and books and fun things like that. So would you share with us what that is?
Yes, right after my son died, and again, that I've had a lot of trauma in my life, but boy, that it came out of the blue and just blew me to pieces, and I just could hardly function. And I think many of your listeners will have been through situations like that in their lives. It's just something that just completely bowled you over. And what I was getting, and I'm a person of faith, so I think God was sending me some signs here. That's what I believe. But I was getting these, all of a sudden, all these Rwanda signals coming through. I sat next to a woman who at a breakfast who had been in Rwanda. It was Rwanda, and I talked to her about her family, and she goes, well, she described her first, now she has a second family. And so she took some people that were within her community that had survived and made them into a second family, which happened a lot then. And so I was hit with that. And then I read the book Left to Tell by Immaculée Ilibigazi, who is this amazing woman. And then I had breakfast or lunch with my friend Pam, who was on the Books for Africa board of directors and had been to Rwanda, and said, we need to do a memorial library for Eric in Rwanda. And I said, yes, I would love to. The reason I went to Rwanda is that they are the experts in grief recovery, in trauma recovery. There is nobody in the world that can hold a candle really to them, I believe, and how they have built their country back from this horrible genocide. I don't know if 1994, there was a horrible situation that occurred in Rwanda in which over 1 million people were murdered by their neighbors. It's a kind of the Hutu tribe, not really a definitive tribe, but it was just kind of just as Hitler had managed a genocide. It had been kind of, politicians had been working on these issues to build hate between groups, and it just all came to a head. And if you can imagine if you were a Tutsi, your next door neighbors would be coming at you with machetes and knives. And it wasn't an invading army, it was your neighbors. Please read about it. I can't even describe the atrocities that occurred. It was just the most horrible thing I could even imagine. Yeah, that happened in 1994, and Eric died in 2009. And in 2011, we brought our first containers over, and I went there because I wanted to find out, how do you recover? Because I lost one child. I lost one son. I still had 2 children left. I had a husband left. I had a good life. They lost everything. And typically during the genocide, all their goods were stolen or burned or whatever. So they came out of it, they did survive with absolutely nothing. Many times their entire families were wiped out. How do you survive that? And the most important thing that happened is they rebuilt their country. It was 1994, 2000, so 16 years, 16, 17 years, if my math is right. After the genocide, I went there and visited, and they had made incredible strides. And the reason they made incredible strides is they decided that if they continued with the hate, that their children would end up in the same position that they were in. So they had to do something to stop the hate. And so what they did, a Tutsi army basically came down from Rwanda and kind of established order, and they punished the perpetrators. So the people that did the murders did not get away scot-free. They were put in prison. They punished the perpetrators, but they also decided as a group to forgive them. How do you do that? How do you forgive them? They forgave them because they knew they needed a better country. And as the perpetrators in 2011, when I was there the first time, were still in jail. You could see them all along the side of the roads. Interestingly enough, they would be lined up with hatchets and sickles and all kinds of things, because they would, in Rwanda, the prisoners grew their own food, so they were out gardening, and they would be walking back to the jail. There'd be maybe 30 of them with hatchets and sickles walking along the road, and then 2 guards, one on either end with rifles. And I was looking out there and saying, wait a minute, isn't that how they killed people in the genocide? Isn't this an unsafe environment? There's 30 people with weapons and just 2. And people with me just looked at me like, well, no, they don't have a place to go. If they went back to their families would turn them right back in. So, don't worry about, they got to serve their sentence, and then they'll get out. And when they got out, they would go back to the communities and many times make amends to the families, acknowledge the hurt that they had done and the people they had killed, and try to make some sort of amends to the families they had impacted by building homes or working for them. It's just an amazing system. And so when I went there because I wanted to find out, how do you heal? And they really, you can't have a better example. They are the most amazing people in the world. They are the most beautiful people I've ever seen. You could see the love coming out of these beautiful women. I worked with a lot of women's cooperatives, and who had lost everything. And many of them had been infected with AIDS during the genocide by the perpetrators. So they killed the families, raped them, and gave them AIDS. And now here they were living with that as well. So Rwanda was an amazing place, and it taught me so many things. And I started working with the dental community there as well. And I don't really know how it happened, but it was started in 2011. So 11 years later, we now have over 40 libraries and 250 some thousand books and some computer libraries. I don't even know how it happened. I just kept plugging away and things just kept coming together. It was probably one of the most amazing privileges I've ever had. And I just wish we could all go to Rwanda and just, figure out how to get along, because that's what we need. Sorry, another long answer.
No.
Wow.
No, it really it really feels like it is an organic path that you've been on that has woven itself into all these facets of your life. And how now you continue to essentially pay it forward and help others with the things that you have learned along the way. And so thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your long answers, because again, like Karen said earlier, I learned a lot, and it makes me want to go to Rwanda. And
we'll talk about that.
Yes. So
maybe the Mint Door should go to Rwanda.
There you go.
Oh, yes. 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 Oh my gosh.
Right. that we can work on that. Excellent. Well, Dr. Harms, we probably are going to wrap this up, but I would love to know just how if somebody's interested in working with you or learning more about any of the things that we've talked about today, what's the best way to find you?
If you just go to the dentalmediator.com, just go to my website, and there's a portal you can get through and get right to me with my email address, or Dr. Kim at PineLakeLawFirm.com.
Excellent. All right. And we will make sure that those links are in our show notes, so that if you are listening while you're driving, you can check the show notes out later and just hit the link and find you. So awesome. Thank you so much for spending some time with the Mint Door today. You brightened our room and our lives, and continue to do so with everything that you do. Thank you so much for all of it.
Well, thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you both.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.